listen to introduction. So I'll go through the introduction briefly again, but focus on the aims and objective. Maybe not aims per se, but the objective, and we'll go through that and explain why. One of the things you would realize with manuscript writing is that every single thing is centered on your objective. We have highlighted why you should write sections. Your methodology section is critical because it is your SOP of the piece of work you've done, and it is the center. It is the decision-making element of your manuscript that decides whether this work would be retained or not. If the methodology can scale through that decision of retaining, every other element of your work will just be revision. Introduction gives us an entry into the justification for your study and the justification for the variables you're bringing on board. Your results reports, the answers to your objective, your discussion expatiates and helps us understand what you're finding, what you found. Most importantly, the discussion is the reflection of you, is the power of your study. If you are going to be quoted, it's not because of your introduction, because your introduction is a synthesis of existing literature and using that synthesis to highlight a gap for what you want to do. Your objective is where your intelligence comes in, that justifies, explains the result. And this is the fundamentals where you are quoted. Okay. Of course, your discussion is highlighting the results that is addressing a gap. So this is why people will quote you, or people will quote you because of further gaps you have highlighted in the discussion, which becomes the fundamentals for their own work. So every element is important. However, the study objective is critical because every single thing is wrapped around the study objective. You are introducing and making a case for the study objective. The study objective defines the study design. The study objective then enables us to justify the variables you want to bring through the introduction you highlighted. And then it is the objective that is the focus of your results. This is not a thesis where you're writing 50 results before you actually answer your study objective. No. In the manuscript, the result is directly focused on your objective. And then your discussion is your objective. Was it sustained? Was it supported? Or was it annulled? Your objective is the center of your paper. So how do you write a good objective? Once again, I'll start my introduction briefly. We've taken that last week. And then go into talking about aims and objective. You'll be surprised that we can spend 1 hour talking about aims and objective. But before we get there, I thought it was very important to highlight this hierarchy of scientific evidence. Maybe sometime, maybe your institution, as much as they have invested in this, may want to invest in training on meta-analysis and systematic review. We'll be very glad to do that. But it's the highest level of evidence. Case studies, animal studies, as you can see the hierarchy. Most times we do cross-sectional studies, but cross-sectional studies do not highlight cross inferences. They are only establishing an association. And at the best, what they can do is establish an hypothesis. They never establish cause effect differentials. Case controls and cohort studies, as well as randomized studies, are longitudinal studies, which can be able to establish cause-effect relationship. They are more powerful. Sadly, in the country, we spend about 98% of the research we do is cross-sectional, and we don't invest in those longitudinal studies. I do appreciate that it's longitudinal studies means money, it means being able to get grants, but that is the powerful studies that we need to be able to generate evidence for policies. Cross-sectional studies, case report, opinion pieces, letters are less so impactful when we talk about changing and improving development and growth of any country. We have to spend time investing in case control cohort studies and randomized clinical control trials. And for you in APIN, where you do a lot of implementation science, this is where you should be investing your evidence. Those in academic institutions currently are focused on writing papers because of their promotion. And so you find that they will be doing case reports, opinion pieces, cross-sectional studies. For the most part, or you have money and you have data and you're implementing programs longitudinally, please move a lot. If the country is going to benefit from you, it sees your ability to report case control cohorts and randomized control trials, which means that every time you have a grant, there must be thinking going into that grant because you will be wanting to report powerfully for the country the outcome, not just ticking off as implementing a project. And of course, meta-analysis is powerful. Actually, when randomized control trials are large, and we do find in the HIV world, large randomized control trials that recruit 3,000, 5,000, 2,000, they have stronger evidence than meta-analysis. But many times, because of funding, you find that randomized control trials will be done in small groups, 35, 75, 100. You don't have that large group. And so the meta-analysis and systematic reviews were brought together to be able to pull those small studies together. Meta-analysis was initially intended for clinical trials, but you're seeing a lot more of meta-analysis involving cross-sectional studies, and longitudinal studies, observational studies, but the story they tell is not as powerful as when you pull together clinical trials. And that's what Cochrane is for. The Cochrane Science, which actually started and housed the systematic review, were focused on pulling data of small clinical trials to be able to tell powerful stories. So why am I saying this? You need to know the level of evidence and the way you report. You cannot be reporting on cross-sectional studies. And highlighting your discussion as though you are talking about the cause effect result. Remember that when you write manuscripts, it's not about you. Yes, you will get your promotion, you get your recognition, but the big deal is about putting evidence in the public space for policies and programs, knowing that even in those public spaces, global evidence making bodies like WHO will unearth the evidence once the piece of work you've done as well. So, okay, understanding why we're doing research, we definitely know we've done our research and we want to report. When we're reporting, the first place you focus on is your introduction. I'm strongly opinionated that you do your introduction before you start any other thing because your introduction helps you justify the variables you need to bring. It synthesizes everything you've read, making the case for the study, including the variables you're going to bring to study. You don't do an analysis and then go back to introduction. Then you'll be trying to fit things in a box. But once you start your introduction first before you go to your analysis, the choice of the variables for your data set, then there is a story to tell. And what is it in the introduction? The introduction, like I tell people, is it's just 5 paragraphs. I was recently in Kenya where we were in a meeting, and I heard my colleague also say exactly the same thing. It's just 5 paragraphs. Um, of course, appreciating that when we're talking about 5 paragraphs, it doesn't mean it cannot be longer. It doesn't mean it cannot be shorter. I have written an introduction for a manuscript that is just half a page, and I've written introduction say manuscript that is as long as 2 pages. So, but for the majority of paper, um, all you need is apologies, is 5 pages, which at most gets you to 1.5 pages of a manuscript. So, what is it that you find in your introduction? You are highlighting 3 things. You first of all highlight what the issue is. What is known about this issue? This is not the time. A manuscript is not a history book. Your thesis is a history book. You can write, I want to write about PrEP and HIV in Nigeria. Then you can spend 50 pages writing about the history. You know, the first case of HIV was in 1982, and then whatever happened, and then their mother died, and then their father ate, and thesis. However, here you don't waste time. You go straight to the issue. What is this issue? Children living with HIV are not having access to antiretrovirals. That's the issue. Then you focus on it. It's not just children living with HIV that does not have antiretrovirals. It's children in Nigeria living with HIV. That's the focus. What is the issue? What is known about that? That's your next paragraph, maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs. What is known? Please note that once you are writing, you're focusing on the elements of the words. For example, now I'm talking about the antiretroviral. This is not the time to treatment. This is not time to be talking about antiretroviral for prevention, antiretroviral for cure. The issue is treatment in children. So you focus on the issue when you're discussing. Nobody's looking for long stories. It's concise, precise, and you're going to the point. So the first thing you highlight is what is known about this issue. You know, the prevalence in the country. Usually, that's where you find the first paragraph. The second paragraph tells you what is not known. What is the gap? The gap is not everything. The gap is what you want to focus on, and then you highlight on that gap. And then what aspect, of that unknown body is it that you want to address? That's the three things. However, that's the three paragraphs. Your paragraphs is strengthened by a fourth and fifth paragraph. The fourth paragraph is your conceptual framework that is also strengthened by the theoretical framework. And we discussed this a little last week. Knowing, I would also highlight it again here, but please note that we cannot do training or education around conceptual or theoretical framework within this 1 hour. Those in social sciences are very powerful on this. This has just recently been, not very recent, being introduced into the biomedical sciences. But if you're going to publish in a Q1 journal, you would need a conceptual framework or a theoretical framework. Otherwise, you're just shopping for data. Your conceptual framework introduces the variable. The theoretical framework gives the backing or the lens for which you're studying this theoretical conceptual framework. And then finally, of course, you highlight your study objective. And if there's an hypothesis to it, it's not all cases that you can generate an hypothesis, but in all cases of your manuscript, there must be a study objective. Please, as much as possible, once again, when you're focusing on study objective, just one objective is enough. You must be a superman or a superwoman or a super human being or a super researcher to pull 3 objectives in the paper. It's going to go haywire, I tell you. One objective is all there is. One objective might have multiple angles, but one objective is one objective. That's enough. If you're really superhuman, do 2. Don't go 3. I can tell you, I know by experience, I've done it over and over, I've tried. It doesn't work. It is only starting to work now that there's big data management and you can do structural equation modeling and you can answer 5 objectives in one single paper. But if you're using the traditional logistic regression analysis, please, if you're superhuman, go to 2. Don't attempt 3. So let's look a little at the next bit. What is conceptual or theoretical framework? Please, once again, I highlight here, I am not able to take you through what it is all about. I spent time last week in helping us understand that. Those that were there last week will appreciate that we went through that a lot more extensively than I can do now. But this is just to highlight that your conceptual framework, what it does is unearth evidence for why you are bringing the variables into a study, which means that that study has been done before. There's nothing new per se about the study, okay? Nothing new per se. What you're highlighting through a conceptual framework is the gap in knowledge, either true gap in population or gap in analysis, gap in implementation, or gap in methodology. Okay, so I do know that age affects adherence, maybe something like that. However, the knowledge there is about the association between age and adherence is only in elderlies. You do not know about it in adolescents. You do not know about it in children. That's a gap in population. So you will definitely bring age as a variable because it's established. The only thing that there is that there's a gap in the population. We're now starting to do this among adolescents or amongst children. There might be a gap in the analysis method. So although it had been done in adolescents, what was done was, a test of association. There wasn't adjustment for the odds ratio. So you're redoing it. So that's a gap in analysis or gap in implementation. Okay, so it was just done as a cross-sectional study, not a longitudinal design. So you do know the variables that should be included in your analysis because there's evidence of the establishment of those associations. All right, but what you're doing is reproducing that in a new population. That's what you do with conceptual framework. Conceptual framework is working in the field of the known, but using what is known to address an unknown. Because remember that your study is about addressing an unknown. So that's what you're working from known to address an unknown. However, when you're using a theoretical framework, please note that even when you use a theoretical framework, you might end up coming to a conceptual framework. What your theoretical framework is doing is establishing, you already have a node in when you have a conceptual framework. But with a theoretical framework, you're working in a field where there's nothing has been done before in that area. There's truly equipoise. Nothing has been done in that area. So you do not know what variables to bring into your methodology. It is a theoretical framework that gives you the evidence for which variables you should bring. Okay, so you're still going to have that conceptual framework, but the theoretical evidence helps you to know the variables that you should bring into your study. So you can see that even the choice of your variables are objective. They're not subjective. You just don't wake up and start to think, oh, okay, do I look at the size of the house to see if it would be associated with your heart rate? It's a theoretical framework that makes it feasible for you to suggest that the association between these two variables are possible. Okay, so there might be gap in concept, gap in perceptions, gap in methodology, even a gap in theory. So it's a theoretical framework that justifies, gives a backing for your thinking about the possibility of an association, even though it had never happened. Many times when you do as you can see with the concept theoretical framework, I have a theory or I've pulled in a number of theory to establish the reason what I want to do. And with that, I can then generate the variables that will move into my methodology. Please once again note that at the end of your sentence, the last sentence, the last paragraph you always write in your introduction is your study objective. So what is it that we want to do in the study objective? The study objective is usually more than one. I think I was writing this for a thesis. Okay. And there's a specific aim, way to address your aim. So this is where you make your project tangible by saying how you want to go about doing what you want to do. Please note that this is where we're talking about smart. If your objective is not smart, it gives worrisome problems to looking at your methodology. A number of times I'm reviewing a manuscript. Once the objective is not clear, that's where I stop. I just give the person the opportunity to rewrite. Without a methodology, without an objective, there's nothing I'm going to go and look for in the methodology. If the objective is not clear, what am I going to go and look for? There's nothing to look for now. So this is the core of the matter. So how do we write a smart objective? Know that the smart means there are 5 critical things when you look at an objective you want to find. You want to be sure it's specific. You want to be sure it's measurable. You want to be sure it's achievable. You want to be sure it's reliable. You want to be sure that there's timeless to it. And when we're thinking about the context of ethics, smart objectives respect the principle of beneficence. So specificity means there's clarity about what needs to be done. Measurable means the right study design has been determined. Achievable means that you're doing something that is truly measurable, especially within the time frame that you want to do it. And then reliability means you design the study in a way that is reliable. So what does each of this mean when we look at it? So when we look at the S, the first is the specific. You're going to write an objective which talks about precision. It cannot be interpreted in 2-3 ways. There's only a single interpretation to that statement. There's only a single interpretation. Once a statement is interpreted multiple ways, then your peer reviewer is going to go, oh, why didn't you look at this? 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 So let's critically look at this objective with the lens of specificity. This objective has multiple problems, I can tell you. But let us look at it critically with the lens of specificity. Somebody writes, I want to determine the association between social demographic profile of females and their menstrual cycle. And I am definite that this objective is not specific. Is there anybody online that wants to, unmute their mic and tell me why I am very certain that this objective is not specific. Is there anybody? Anyone, please? Okay, nobody. So a number of things is not okay with this objective. This person is saying, I want to determine the association first between the social demographic profile. Which one? Social demographic profile, I'm not sure you do know that social demographic profile has over 42 different elements. So if this person comes and tells me, I want to determine the association between social demographic profile and of females and their menstrual cycle, at the end of the day, this person only ends up looking at age, sex, and socioeconomic status. I, as a reviewer, can say, why didn't you look at income? Why didn't you look at marital status? Why didn't you look at urban rural dwelling? Why didn't you look at, I would bring ethnicity? Why didn't you look at race? I will bring a million and one things because I do understand the subject and I understand clearly what is possible. If you did a proper conceptual framework, you would not be this vague because with your conceptual framework, there's clarity about the social demographic factors that you have seen and understand that is associated, so you'll be clear. But when you write things like association between social demographic profile and I'm looking at the other problems, then you're leaving yourself open and in a Q1 journal, nobody's going to engage with this. The second non-specific element here is the females. Believe me, guys, there are females from zero. The day a child is born, you can determine if it's male or female. Of course, when it's getting older, we know about gender and the 50 different genders there are. But the day this child is born, age zero, day zero, and day one, up till for people living up to 120 years in Japan, they're females. So which age group are you dealing with? There is nothing specific about this female identity. And of course, the menstrual cycle. I think there are 5 cycles or 4 cycles of the menstrual cycle. Are you dealing with all the cycles? So so you can see the absurdity of this objective. Number one, the social demographic profile, the way it's defined is not specific. The females is not specific. The menstrual cycle is not specific. The worst thing is you have no idea where the study is doing is holding. Is it a global analysis? Is it Nigeria? Is it Southwest? Is it Ile-Ife? Is it Obafemi Awolowo University? Where is this? Okay. Completely vague, non-precise. This is very problematic. The headache with this kind of study objectives when you see it in manuscript is that they will end up writing something. You will end up in the methodology seeing things that are just springing up to you in surprises. Number one, the introduction does not say this variable is coming on board. The objective does not say this variable is coming on board. You just read the methodology and you see all kinds of variables. Then when they're doing the associations, you're starting to see things. There is no specificity from that objective. Once this objective is not specific, every other thing onto the discussion is just rambling. You're just going to be entering things and jamming into things by accident. Okay. If you agree with me, let me see your electronic hands. I can see you didn't unmute your mic to speak. That was a problem. But at least if you're following me, let me see your electronic hands. Thank you. At least 3% is with me and 1% is clapping. Thank you. I'm glad about that. So the next word we're looking at is measure. Measure. Thank you. I see 10 people. Thank you for being with me. Measurable. The objective needs to draw boundaries about what is explorable. When you say measurable, you can't do everything. What is it that you're looking for? In a way that person would say you have achieved it. In a way that all of us will say we have achieved it. You are able to identify the explanatory variables, the independent variables. What is it that we're exploring? And let's critically look at this objective to be able to look at the element when we say measurability. This person says, I want to identify the relationship between social demographic profiles of females and their menstrual cycle. We all agreed, okay, that the previous objective, if you recall, is almost exactly the same. We said this is not specific. We had a problem with the specificity. Now we're not dealing with specificity in this almost objective, but we're not looking at measurability. Okay, so we're not looking at those issues of specificity. This person noted two things. You want to identify the relationship. Relationship here is the headache. Okay, so please look at this. If you remember, you would determine the association. That is good because what you're doing is association immediately, guys. Immediately, if you are there, you know that this person is doing a quantitative study. Are you with me? If you believe me, let me see your electronic hands. The minute you read this, you say determine the association. Straight, you know this person is doing a quantitative study. This person comes now and writes, I'm determining the relationship. What relationship? Is it qualitative? Is it quantitative? Most likely it's quantitative. But what? Is it an association? Is it a trend? Is it an impact? Is it an effect? Is it a correlation? There is nothing measurable about relationships because there are multiple options to relationships. There are multiple ways of establishing relationships. This study, this is completely vague. I'm lost about the methodology of this person. Relationship could be association, it could be trend, it could be impact, it could be effect, it could be correlation, and many other things. So this is completely vague. I don't know what this person wants to measure. And many times when we're talking about quantitative, we don't identify. To identify, it means it's only you that can identify it. What we use is the word assess. Identify gives you, the researcher, the autonomy to determine whether you are sound or not. So we don't usually use the word identify, but that is the problem with this. You can see one, this objective, the first of all, is not specific. Now it has another problem. It's not measurable. The next thing you want to do is achievable. Objectives have to be practical and doable. They cannot be broad and unresearchable. Okay, and ethics also guide consideration when you're thinking about what is possible. Um, Maybe someday, sometime during your face-to-face, we'll be talking about what it means to design studies, what it means to make choices about study designs, because possibilities are also issues to consider. You can't always do clinical trials. You can't always do cross-sectional studies. What is ethically possible? Okay. So when we're talking about achievable, you also to determine it also helps you to determine the study design. For example, let's look at this. To measure the impact of age and ethnicity of 15 to 19-year-old females and their menstrual flow. Okay, so come, let's go together. This person is now, this objective is specific. If you agree with me, raise your hand. This person has clarity. I'm not looking at social demographic groups. I'm looking at age and ethnicity. I'm not looking at females. I'm looking at 15 to 19 years. I'm not looking at menstrual cycle. I'm looking at menstrual flow, which is one of the 4 points in the menstrual cycle. Very good. It's specific. And this is what we're talking about. If this person is also um, address the issue of measurability, it's not looking at relationship, it's looking at impact. It wants to measure impact. It wants to measure age and ethnicity of 15 to 19-year-olds, females, and their menstrual flow. But there is a problem with achievability for conducting the study in Nigeria. Who can identify what the problem is with children for this study if you're going to do it in Nigeria? Is there anybody? Okay, please go ahead and speak. Okay. Anybody? I mean, somebody should be able to talk to me. Talk to me now. This is how many weeks? Talk to me. Somebody talk to me. Dr. Isaac, talk to me. Okay. Benedict Cook, Benedict, please go ahead and unmute your mic.
Okay, good morning. And I think the issue here is that Nigeria as a country is a multi-ethnic nation. And so it means that the study has to be spread across all the multiple different ethnic groups we have in Nigeria.
God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. Thanks for being brilliant this morning. Thank you. I'm sure you're brilliant every day, but bringing your brilliance to me this morning, I very much appreciate it. Brilliant. So this person is going to measure the impact of age and ethnicity, 300 and something ethnic groups in Nigeria. When is this person going to finish? He can't finish. You can't finish. Because you remember for each ethnic group, you have to be able to determine the appropriate sample size is going to go to how many places in the Nigeria and in which corner. This person cannot achieve this result. Even if you give him all the money, he won't finish this thing in 5 years. Two, why can you not finish in 5 years? It's supposed to measure the impact. Impact means that you are doing this thing for nothing less than 5 years. Once you say impact, it is a longitudinal thing. It is a longitudinal thing. It is a longitudinal thing of 5 years and beyond. That's the difference between impact and effect. Effect is also longitudinal, but it's shorter. You can measure effect in year 1, year 2, year 3, but you measure impact after year 5, year 6, year 7. So this person is going to be looking at age and ethnicity, 300 and something, over 5 years and beyond. Abba. Even if you give this person $50 million, you're not going to finish the study. So it can't be achievable. If I'm communicating, let me see your hands. These things matter. The words you bring, the words you bring, the words you bring into your objective tells us where you're going and tells us what to look for, in your uh, methodology. Thank you very much. I see 6 people. Thank you. It tells us what to look for in your methodology. It tells us from the beginning, are we going to do a quantitative? Are we going to do a qualitative? Are we going to do a mixed method? Are we going to do longitudinal? Are we going to use cross-sectional study? So for imagine this person says, I want to measure the impact of age and ethnicity. And then at the end of the day, it's a cross-sectional design. You don't finish now. That's the end of the abstract. Don't even read the manuscript, just send it back because the design cannot answer the study objective. I want to measure the effect, and you're looking at cross-sectional study. Except you justify that the effect you're establishing now is a statistical effect. I'm looking at this. Okay. So these are things that tells what it is that we're looking in our methodology. And then reliability. In research, reliability is a big thing. It must be reproducible. In research terms, reliability refers to consistency. When something is reliable, it indicates the level of consistency. Before I go to look at this research result, research question, I want to highlight again that you cannot wake up and develop an instrument and say you are measuring a phenomenon, say a purpose, because you have to establish that that instrument is reliable. It is first consistent in what it is saying, and then it is reliable. That means if every time you use that instrument, it is measuring what it is saying it is measuring. It is not interpreted in multiple ways. So when you develop an instrument, you first do the reliability. Consistency, content validity, construct validity, reliability, dimensionality. It's a whole study on its own. So don't just wake up and use an instrument. Even when you want to use an instrument, you have to adapt it appropriately. For example, an instrument has been developed in England, it has not been used in Nigeria. You're the first person using it in Nigeria. You must validate it, which means content construct and reliability for Nigeria. Even if it has been done in Nigeria, and it was done in the elderly. You now want to use that same instrument for adolescents. You must validate it for adolescents because the way adolescents communicate differs from adults. If you say bad, this is bad for an adult, hey, it's not good. If you say this is bad for an adolescent, it means it is very good. So you can't be using the word in the same context for an adult and adolescent because generational interpretation of language differs. If you have used this instrument in the hospital and it was validated for the hospital, if you now want to do population level study, you have to validate it for population level. It's not the same. It's not the same. So these are critical things that go into reliability, the choice of your variables and the validity of the instruments you're going to use if you're going to use instruments. The ability for this instrument to measure exactly the same thing every time it is repeatedly used. So let's look at this question. This research objective. And please, if they are there, please raise your hand and answer with me what you think is the problem of reliability. This individual researchers wants to determine the association between dress codes and mood changes in adolescent females during menstrual periods. This is very specific. It is not looking for everything. It's looking at dress color. It's looking at mood changes. It's looking at adolescent females, which means I'm looking at 10 to 9. It's looking at a menstrual period. Well, maybe he hasn't told us which country or which local government. That limits the specificity. It's measurable because this is about associations, and therefore any statistical tool you're going to deal with are those things that determine association. It's not looking, it's not identifying, it's determining. Okay? So, but then we have a problem with reliability. Is there anybody there that wants to help us identify what the problem of reliability is with this study objective? Anyone, please? Anyone, please? Okay? Or somebody wants to spare us their brilliance. What is the headache with specificity, reliability here? Okay, well, for time's sake, if you look at the issue of dress color, guys, I don't think there's an instrument that measures dress color. Number one, then two, we see dress colors in different ways. If you are color blind, the way you see a color is different. Two, even if that dress is blue today, once you put it inside water, the next minute it might not be the same blue. The headache with this dress color is the reliability, knowing that the number of dress colors when it comes to women it can be coconut red, magenta blue, can it come brown, pepper green, variabilities of color for ordinary blue. Look at blue alone: sapphire blue, sky blue, green blue, sea blue, orange blue, olive blue, ordinary blue, ordinary blue. Not to talk of all the reliability of measure of dress color is too varied for you to be able to say you have reliability in dress color. Not to even talk of mood change. Maybe mood change might have an instrument to measure it when you go to the psychiatrist. Even mood change may be something that how do you reliably measure mood change? So this is an issue. So while this is specific, is measurable, you know, the reliability becomes a problem. Even if you can do this, you can achieve a result. But how is it that after you have done that study, you came back in 2 weeks and you want to repeat that study, you will still get the same. Or you did it and I am going to do it, and five of us are going to do it, and our measures are going to be the same. Dress color is an issue. If there is no instrument to measure color reliably and understand that this color remains constant over time, dress color, then it might be an issue because dress color can change by multiple things within 2 weeks. It can be the water, you want to wash it, it might be the sun, blah, blah, blah. If I'm communicating with you, let me see your hands, yeah? And then we'll go to the last. Let me see your electronic hands. Thank you. I see 5. I see, now 12. All right. You're better now. Thanks for the encouragement. And the last thing is time bound. Remember, once again, for those of you, um, no, I've not taught that. You must always talk about time. You must always talk about time in your methodology because things happen. That things must happen. Things before COVID is different from time before after COVID. Time before Ebola is different from time after Ebola is different from time before Ebola. Time before SDG is different from time after SDG. Time matters. So many things changes with time. So you must have a piece of work to do within a period of time. For example, let's look at this reference. It says to conduct a systematic review of the effect of climate change on menstrual flow of adolescents 15 to 19 years old. If you look at specificity, it's clear. If you look at measurability, is clear. There's a systematic review. If you look at reliability, it's going to use systematic review instruments. The headache now is time. It wants to look at the effect of climate change on menstrual flow. Which climate change? Is it since the world was formed, or is it climate change in the last 5 years, or is it climate change in the last 10 years? What's the time? This cannot be forever. Of course, when we see effect, we appreciate very well that this might have a longitudinal element to it, but there's no time. So this person could be measuring, conducting systematic review on the effect of climate change since climate ever existed, since the world began, because it's going to go and be looking at all great literatures and published papers. This is the headache with time. And once you tell us the time, we can relate to the context of that time to be able to understand your findings. You must put time, and you must put time for the piece of work. Okay, I think I'm about coming to the end. Once you write an objective, it cannot be rushed. You have to think about it critically. Many times, your objective will help you generate your research question. I sent you a document on research question that helps explain research question thoroughly. It's not my area of expertise. Dr. Osaho teaches that excellently well. you will understand how to construct. But for me, you have to have an objective first before you have your research question, because your research question will otherwise be able to generate your research objective. But for research question, but once you get your objective, you have to read. Your objective doesn't just wake up. You can have an idea of what you want to do. That is very good. But for you to finalize the objective, you would have read to truly understand what it, and it is that reading that informs the structuring of your introduction. Please note that objectives for any study can be primary, secondary, or tertiary. Be very clear about what it is. Usually for manuscripts, you focus on primary objectives. Usually, what happens, however, is that after your primary objective, you can do a secondary analysis of that data to generate answers to secondary objectives or tertiary objectives, which are now more exploratory rather than being more definitive. Why? Because your primary objective is what you calculated the sample size for. It is what you calculated the sample size for that is your primary objective, because it says with categorically that with this sample size calculation, the study is powered. I repeat it, the study is powered to answer the study objective. I calculated the sample size so that it is powered to be able to answer the study objective. Once I can meet the the sample size for the study objective within 85 to 100% recruitment, I can say clearly with certainty that what I have found has answered my study objective. Once you start using that sample to do some other things, all you are achieving are secondary objectives or tertiary objectives. They're only exploratory. Okay, because the studies were not powered to answer that research question. But there is data that is available, and then you're using that data exploratively to answer objective. Many times when you have such data, you can then be able to establish that that data, though it's secondary analysis, can be powerful enough to answer your objective if you do a fresh sample calculation, and the sample size calculation very well says that the data is adequate in terms of numbers to be able to answer the objective. But otherwise, the primary objective is what the sample was calculated for. For example, I want to find an association between age and adherence. But in that data, I also collected sex and income. My study is powered for age and adherence. My secondary objective can now look at sex and adherence, okay, in another paper. Or my secondary objective can now look at association between age and sex, okay, because these are all variables in the data and I can start to play around with them. But I appreciate that this very sample size was not calculated to be able to do that. I hope this helps. Thank you for listening. I have spent 45 minutes. I have 15 minutes open for questions. Thank you very much. Over to you, Kudus.
Thank you very, very much, Prof. I can see the claps all over the screens. I'm sure the listener got the key message from the presentation and they will use it for their manuscript writing. We'll now take questions or comments or clarification from the participants. Please use your e-hand so that it can be called upon. Looking at the chat box, there are just comments responding to your in-class questions. No question on the chat box. Okay.
I think there's
Daniel,
a hand off.
Unmute yourself and speak. Thank you.
Maybe
Daniel, you can unmute yourself.
I think I have a feeling that maybe people can't unmute themselves.
You
please
can
help.
Unmute now, Ma.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Daniel, is it a legacy hand? Can you hear me? Prof, can you hear me, Ma?
I can hear you clearly, just. Yeah, if there's any other person, yeah. If Daniel can't unmute. Daniel, if you can't unmute, maybe you type it in the chat box. Mhm. Any other person?
Good morning, Prof.
Good morning, sir.
Dr. Isaac.
Yeah, thank you for the really great lecture. I have a question that I've been meaning to ask for a while now. When we conduct a study and we have multiple objectives, and we're able to actually answer those objectives, when it comes to time to write the manuscript, you discover that you cannot cram a lot of those findings into one paper. So
Very
how
correct.
ethical is it to use the same sample size, same tool, same setting to publish multiple papers, that it won't look like, you have duplicated, your work, and speaking it in different, presenting it in different languages and fora. So it's always been a
So
challenge to me.
it's not,
Thank you.
yeah, excellent question. Excellent question. Very excellent question. What you do is from the methodology you would have explained. This is uh this is a large study. And usually the best way to approach that is you publish the principal study. Okay, so you wait, publish the principal study. Once you have published the principal study, then you can write 50, even if it's like 80, because what you keep doing is referring to that principal study. This is a secondary analysis, or this is a sub-analysis, or this is a, um, you know, this is derived from this main study. So that main study, you do not need to now repeat extensively the methodology, because the main study would have written the methodology extensively. So in your subsequent papers, you will refer to that methodology, to that principal study, do a brief 1 or 2 paragraphs about the methodology, which that other one would have written as 3-5 pages. But because your analysis will be different, you will now spend time writing the analysis plan. However, please note that you cannot repeat data sets. So if your data, if your one study had looked at the association between age and sex, you can't look at it again because you'll be repeating that data set. You can now look at sex and income. But a study has looked at age and sex, you can't do age and sex analysis again. One of the things I do, because many times when I'm going to repeat that, I might have to repeat prevalence. People tend to try and push, because I've done the primary study. The primary study already told you the prevalence. But when I'm doing the secondary analysis, the first thing that becomes a gap is that because I'm looking for variables and they're missing, I might not have the same sample size as the primary study. So the primary study has 1,490. This sub-analysis now has 800. I cannot report prevalence for 800 when it has been established as prevalence in the 1,480. So I never go the route of reporting prevalence. Now, this is a secondary analysis. I'm talking about proportion. So it's the appropriate representation. And I can tell you, I do it all the time. I have a COVID study where we collected data from 20,000 people from 152 countries around the world. And we've written 34 papers. At no time is there a repeat. There's no repeat, but there's continuous reference to the paper, one, that established the validity of the instrument, and two, if there's a principal study, we refer to it. We didn't have a principal study, it was the validity that remained the central reference. I hope that helps in any way.
It does a lot. Thank you very much,
Excellent.
Prof.
You're
Clear
very
now.
much welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think there is no hand up, and there are no comments on the chat box
All right.
requiring attention.
So we have 9 minutes to give back. That's perfect. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and see you next week. You have back your 9 minutes. Over to you, producer. Bye.
All right, thank you very much, ma, and thank you for being a beautiful audience. See you next week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.